Confusion reigns at the State Department. Worldwide protests sow confusion in the Blinken playbook. It was a busy week for U.S. foreign policy that kept Secretary of State Antony Blinken busy. There was a NATO foreign minister meeting in Brussels, the OSCE conference in Skopje, the COP28 summit in Dubai, presumably where Blinken needed to attend to keep VP Harris on message and to protect the State Department turf from former Secretary of State and now climate czar John Kerry, and the Israeli-Hamas hostage exchange that ended and fighting resumed in Gaza. This would be a challenging week for any Secretary of State, but it's becoming clear that Blinken's foreign policy philosophy is incompatible with the challenges in the world. Who is Antony Blinken? Antony Blinken is the son of Jewish parents who was raised in the world of international diplomacy. His father, Donald, was the ambassador to Hungary, and his uncle, Alan, was the ambassador to Belgium. Antony attended school in Paris, which perfected his ability to speak French, and he later attended Harvard and Columbia. He served in the State Department and the National Security Council under President Clinton when his dad was ambassador to Hungary. He later served as the staff director to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, where he worked with Senator Joe Biden. Blinken was to serve as the foreign policy advisor to Biden's failed 2008 presidential campaign, and then he went on to advise Obama-Biden transition team. He served as VP Biden's national security advisor and as a deputy advisor to President Obama, where he served under and closely with Susan Rice. In his time within the upper echelon of the powers in Washington, it is clear that Blinken's philosophy is closely aligned with European politics and security, and he is an interventionalist. He supported the invasion of Iraq in 2003, supported armed intervention in Libya, advocated for a more aggressive policy in the Syrian civil war, played a hand in U.S. policy in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and was a supporter of the Iran nuclear deal. He believes that Europe is a vital partner and publicly criticized President Trump's policy to reduce U.S. troop presence in Germany, stating that would only help Vladimir Putin. He could not stick to the merits of his argument, but instead went to Democratic talking points. Blinken believes that the U.S. should enact its leadership through and with multinational organizations instead of on its own or in bilateral organizations. So it is apparent where his commitment to the Ukraine war at all costs is from. Blinken's support of European Union, NATO, and European security, as well as his interventionist policy, makes it clear that he's the architect of Biden's Ukraine policy, which also serves the prior Biden's and Kerry's family's interests in Ukraine. Blinken, serving under the shadow of Susan Rice, was not able to influence the Obama administration to the extent he can now, which is probably why Obama had a confusing Ukraine policy during and after the 2008 Russian invasion, and over Obama's weak-willed response in Syria, which eventually led to the Secretary of State John Kerry to invite Vladimir Putin and the Russians to play a pivotal role in the Syrian conflict. Blinken now is in the driver's seat of Biden foreign policy. It is quite apparent. Blinken's philosophy started to show cracks over Middle East policy. The Middle East was not Europe, and it caused issues for Blinken and Biden like it has so many other administrations. And instead of going with the tailwinds given to them by President Trump's Abraham Accords, it was intentionally decided that they would not have anything to do with any foreign policy doctrines from Trump. The result is that Blinken tried to pursue rejoining the Iran nuclear deal at the expense of Saudi and Israeli relations. After billions of dollars of incentives to Iran, it was clear that Iran was going to keep the dollars and continue the course on terrorism and nuclear development. The U.S. went back to the Abraham Accord formula, but much of the foreign policy goodwill from Trump was gone from both the Israelis and the Saudis. The cracks in his philosophy became chasms when the attack occurred on October 7th. Biden, clearly being influenced by Blinken, came to the strong defense of the Israelis' right to defend itself. This was consistent with traditional Democrat policy because of strong domestic political support from the Jewish community. Obama was the exception, who had an antagonistic relationship with the Israelis. Everything seemed to be going as intended for a few days, and then the wide-ranging and energetic anti-Israel and anti-Semitic protests started, including in the U.S., which was close to shattering the Democratic coalition. Protests are not only in the general public, but are also within the State Department. The State Department is now facing a rebellion within its ranks against the pro-Israeli stance that is official U.S. policy. The result is that Biden has challenges within the world community, within his political base and supporters, Congress, and now within his own State Department that is largely staffed by Obama appointees. Biden is struggling to keep his supporters together by continuing to support Israel, but also providing aid to Hamas while claiming that he is tempering Israel's campaign. Biden's sagging poll numbers show that he continues to lose support, and as a result, Blinken is adjusting his policy and is outside his normal comfort zone. This week, he told Israel defense minister that Israel does not have the, quote, credit to continue its operation to defeat Hamas or campaign into southern Gaza. It is unclear if Blinken meant financial credit or political credit or both. Most likely he meant both and demonstrates that domestic and international pressure is influencing policy. Democrats since 2016 have been fostering an anti-Russian campaign against Trump and the Republicans, so when the Russian invasion of Ukraine occurred, an approving audience was already created to offer nearly unconditional support to Ukraine. They thought that support, with the strong Jewish constituency and traditional right-wing support against terrorism, would create support identical to Ukraine's support. This did not happen, for various reasons that we won't discuss in this article, and now U.S. foreign policy is in a confused state. The State Department continues to press for continuation of the war in Ukraine as the war against Putin, which is part of the Democratic political messaging, despite the fact that it is leaked that the U.S. wants Ukraine to open peace talks. The State Department has continued publicly to support the war, so it's most likely that the voices in the Defense Department are the ones that are wanting to end the war. But peace talks are the jurisdiction of the State Department. On the other hand, they are seeking to pressure and threaten Israel to end the war and to have Israel publicly do it so that the Democrats can hope to hold on to both their Jewish and Muslim coalition of their party, especially leading into 2024. Both wars have started by invasions of sovereign territory by parties hostile to the U.S., so it's hard to argue that both wars are fundamentally different when they are actually fundamentally the same. The intent was for the U.S. to provide the same level of support for both wars, which would be consistent with Blinken's philosophy and his close ties to Europeans and Israelis. The Ukraine war is funding challenges, but Blinken is undeterred for continued open-ended support. But the challenges with Israel support is politically challenged within the Democratic Party and his base. Blinken's sudden and curt message to the Israelis is that even his foreign policy philosophy is trumped by Democratic electoral politics and is not consistent with his typical philosophy.